I am grateful yet again. I'm so grateful that there's so many people who actually want to sit and chat with me for hours on end. I'm really surprised by that sometimes, but I'm really grateful again that Dominic has taken time out of his busy schedule and come to chat with us about male INFJs. I'm so excited. I'm really excited about this topic because I really feel like, first of all, I love male INFJs. They're awesome. They're great. They're cool people, and a lot of them who message me on the channel, I really feel like I'm like their elder sister. I'm like, please come, I'll give you a hug, and everything's gonna be okay. But I also feel bad because a lot of times I feel, and again, I'm not an expert, but from the conversations I've had, I feel like male INFJs tend to be more neurotic and have a lot more doubt within themselves, and also feel really out of place in the world. I mean, INFJs in general feel out of place in the world, but male INFJs, it's like a whole new level of being alienated from the world as it is right now. A lot of it has to do with the alpha male, type that's perpetuated as the ideal type, and we'll speak a lot more about that. But again, I wanted to bring Dominic in because I wanted him to give his perspective on what it is like to be a male INFJ who is actually self-actualized in this world. He maybe was unhealthy in the past. I didn't know him then, but I really feel like he's come into his own now. And I'm really happy as an elder sister to see him grow in this fashion. So I want to share that with you all, obviously, and I want him to share his experience with us as well. So thank you, Dominic.
Thank you back. That's a very nice introduction. I like being introduced to self-actualized. Yeah, but I also it was definitely true that I was less self-actualized and unhealthy in the past, in various ways. So I guess we should get straight into that.
If you wish, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it took a long time for me to become somebody who knew how to make friends with people, really properly make friends with people, and somebody who knew how to deal with emotions. So I was somebody who, I don't know if a lot of INFJ men do this, but I was somebody who turned a lot to spirituality rather than trying to deal with human relationships. I wanted to replace human relationships with some sort of transcendence or, and meditation is brilliant, but I wanted to replace all human relationships with meditation because I think I wanted to have that sort of control and didn't want to deal with the human world. I remember at sort of 17 having a crush on a girl and, literally running away at one point when I saw her coming down the corridor because I was so shy around her and couldn't sort of express myself in any way.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe that's common for other INFJ men, but yeah, I think there's can be a lot of emotional distress there.
Yes. I remember you saying that one of the reasons why, I mean, okay, I don't know if you actually said it directly, but one of the reasons why you felt this way also, or you had a little bit of doubt, was because your father has a little bit of a tendency to put you down because of the way you are. You're more sensitive, obviously, which is a typical trait of an INFJ male. And, you're more emotional, you're more of a feeling person rather than a thinking person. And I feel like I noticed that in a lot of the male INFJ males that message me is that, they have this tendency to be denigrated not only by society as a whole, obviously, who really says, okay, great, sensitive, feeling man is one that like is ideal in society, even though somehow we say it's a good thing, but we also at the same time say it's a bad thing. So it's like these mixed messages being sent to the world, to the men, but also a lot of them had to deal with, I know from like personal experience talking to male INFJs, they had to deal with fathers who were extremely strict with them, even more so than their siblings, because they're like, okay, I need to beat you into shape because you're obviously way too much of a, whatever word you want to use, pansy or sissy or all the ugly words that people use for men who are more sensitive. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but that's something that has come up for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very valuable. Yeah, I think I've been sort of lucky that, yes, my father sort of put me down, but there was other people that I knew who would have been a lot worse to have as fathers. Let's put it that way. Yes. But I definitely have, there's not that desire, I think, in most parents to nurture and really nurture the sensitivity and bring that to fruition. But you can't twist something out of shape. If somebody is a sensitive person, you need to have that, I'm only just getting into the self-care routines and so forth that are so essential. Self-care, there's something feminine about self-care. I think generally, we tend to think about women having, bubble baths when we think about self-care, but, self-care is so important, particularly as an INFJ male, take time to soothe yourself. Sometimes
Yes.
maybe you need to crawl under blankets, or you're going to, cozy spaces. You're going to need those things. You're going to get overwhelmed pretty easily and pretty regularly throughout the day, and you need to take that time to actually calm yourself. It's not like you're not going to be the sort of person who's making millions on Wall Street, because that environment would burn you out in about a week. Um,
Unless you're working from home, then you could do it perhaps. Yeah.
perhaps, yeah. Um, yeah, so I think there's that, and I think you have to sort of reclaim that, because you're generally fathers and mothers, but particularly fathers, are not going to give that to you. And so you have to be that sort of father that wants to nurture who you are and not who somebody else thinks you should be.
Yes.
I think that takes time. That takes a lot of time to work out who you are, and
Yes.
then to actually say, I'm going to be that. And I think it takes bravery, because what you need to do is repeatedly assert who you are. So there's going to be times when you just feel really nervous about asserting who you are.
Mhm.
When there's about a 95% chance that nothing really bad is going to happen, I think then you've got to push yourself, because you're trying to push back on the shame and the fear. I
Yes.
remember Gabor Mate once said that when your actual self-development begins with shame. You have to actually go through a period of shame before you can become who you really are, because you're going to have to learn how not to be the person who tries to be somebody else, or who feels ashamed for being just who they are. And the
Wow.
only way you can do that is by feeling the feelings and then going through them. And so I had to go through that. There's there's a lot of shame I've had to go through, and sometimes shame can be useful, but there's times when it's toxic, and trying to work out those times when you're actually just being held back, being who you really are. I think that's really useful, and sort of starting that process can be difficult, but just finding little ways that you can do that's really important.
Yes, and I'm just going to add it in here. I've done a video on this in the past, but Brene Brown's definition of shame versus guilt is really useful here, because shame is always very toxic, almost always, because it denigrates you as a person, because you are who you are, like you are sensitive, so you feel shamed for that. Whereas guilt is for what you are doing. You're feeling guilty for the action, not for who you are, like your personality or characteristic. And a lot of genetics say that, a lot of our personality is actually like set, when you're actually born. You have a lot of traits. Yes, you can build many different things into your characteristics, into your personality, but a lot of it is who you are. A lot of INFJs were probably born this way. Maybe they were created by their environment, but a lot of us were probably born this way. And so it's not like you can be like, hey, be something else, do something else, be a certain different way. This is who I am. I'm an introvert. I've been an introvert all my life. I can't suddenly just change and be like, all right, I'm going to be an extrovert now. So I just wanted to add that in.
No, that's really, really valuable. Um, yeah, I think it's worth actually just focusing on that for a moment to actually think about, well, the value of the INFJ male in society. And when you
Yes.
look at some of the most famous INFJ males, it's Gandhi. I imagine Obama is an INFJ. I'm
Yes,
currently reading
yes.
his memoir, and he can be he tears up a lot in his memoir. And I definitely cried while reading that memoir.
Really?
Um, yeah, but obviously he managed to achieve many, many great things, and
Yeah.
other leaders like Martin Luther King as well. Um,
Mm,
these great leaders, they managed to achieve great things and had a very sensitive heart, which is partly what opened them to this desire to help, reduce the indignities and injustices in the world.
yes.
Um, that's definitely a part of the INFJ male, and those people have had a profound influence on history. Um, so I think that's something really to remember as an INFJ male. When you're sitting in your room and you're feeling like no one would ever date you, and
Yes.
and nobody could, or people just take advantage of you, because that's the other side. I think there are particularly narcissistic women do seem to find INFJ males
Of
out and
course. I can
and try
imagine.
and
Oh
have
my
them
gosh.
us. Yes. Um, yeah. So I think um, there is definitely something that that having that heart. Um, that's definitely something you can bring towards a leadership position. But I think it can be very hard for INFJ males to really assert themselves, because you have to learn, I think, also how to hear no as well. You have to learn how to actually put yourself out there and hear people say no to you without
Mhm.
feeling like your whole existence has been denied because people say, no, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to be on your committee. I've started, one of the first things that I did that really helped me was when I chose to reboot a creative writing society at my university. And so I didn't have anybody to be on my committee. So I just went and asked basic strangers on my course if they would
Mhm.
be on my committee. And most people said no. And I had
Mhm.
to learn just to repeatedly hear people say no and turn me down, and then be okay with that. And
Yes.
that was massively useful. Um, and that begins slowly, and the process of, actually, I can do this leadership thing. I can I can actually put myself out there because I know I'm competent in certain things. And, I shouldn't be ashamed of putting myself out there and trying to tell other people about that. I think as INFJ males, sometimes, especially with the introversion thing, it can be very easy to stay within our comfort zone.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Oh my God, I really love that. Um, I really love that you were like, all right, I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm gonna be rejected a billion times over, and it should be okay. I really think that that's the best way to do it. I've done it a billion times myself as well, and trolls and all this stuff. And I think that's really the way to build it up, because you realize, yeah, I'm not gonna die if someone says no to me, and it's not such a big deal. And people might laugh at you, but then you don't remember it a few days later, and they completely forget about it a few minutes later. And so it doesn't, nothing really sticks, and you can just do what you want to do and live the way you want to live, because nothing's gonna ever matter anyways, really, if you think about it.
It's like playing a musical instrument. When you
Mm.
start playing the guitar, you don't have calluses and it hurts. But as
Yes.
you go forward, the calluses build up, and actually you get much more skilled at it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with social interactions. You need to build up those calluses.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that maybe sounds like a slightly daunting thing. I think if you're an INFJ male who's not yet started that process, I think it can sound like quite a daunting thing. But it really is taking those small steps.
Hmm.
I think that's really, really key.
Yeah. And I do want to mention that one of the things that I really admire about you is that you did the creative writing course, and you're really following your passion and your dream, which is to write. You want to write fiction. And I read the first chapter of one of your books, and it was amazing. And how did you kind of get onto this thing where there are a lot of people and things in the world telling you, hey, you're never going to make money from writing, or you're never going to make money from your passion, or you're never going to make money if you do what your heart's telling you to do. So how did you get over that?
That's a very interesting question. Uh, I mean, the first thing I actually had to get over was the shame I had about writing.
Yes.
I used to be ashamed. When I was sort of a teenager, I'd actually hide from my parents the fact that I was a writer, and like
Wow.
writing. It was something I was almost anxious that anyone would find out that I was a writer.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I slowly began to introduce, actually showing my work to other people, and that's,
Hmm.
I got over that particular shame and anxiety. Um, but yeah, the making the money. Yes, creativity is a gamble.
Yes.
Personally, I've always thought that I would have a second job. So I want to be a lecturer. I do online tutoring as well.
Hmm.
So it's definitely the way that I've sort of worked through that is trying to work out which jobs I can have that will um, support my writing. So that
Yeah.
I mean, my writing might turn out really, really well. But
Yes.
there's also that part of me that wants to keep contact with other people. I'm somebody who really enjoys nurturing other people and helping
Yeah.
them. I think that's true of a lot of INFJ
Yes.
males.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to keep that contact because in writing you're so solitary. I also wanted to have that contact with actual students or with other people in a nurturing environment.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of why I've combined those two things, sort of writing, and then my long-term plans are to become sort of a university lecturer.
So as I was saying, there are a lot of male INFJs who've kind of isolated themselves, and they're in this space of mind where they have this negativity and hatred towards most people in general, of course, but also particularly towards women. And whenever I talk to them, they're particularly hateful towards me as well. And I noticed that not only do I get angry on their behalf, obviously, because they've dealt with a lot of issues in their past, but also I get a little bit upset and fearful for them because, they have no one around them, and they're literally just by themselves. They have no one that they can turn to. So I wanted to get your opinion on that, and if you ever were in that phase where you isolated yourself.
Yeah, because I had a very different sort of isolation phase, which is much more sort of monkish rather than say very, very bitter.
Yes, yes.
Um, but I think I do understand that bitterness to a degree.
Yeah.
I remember having this one experience where I was feeling really bitter, more towards myself than towards other people.
Uh-huh.
Thinking that I was completely unlovable, and it was only a few months ago. Like, oh, no one would ever want to be with me, etc., etc. And then I asked myself a question: like, how many women have I actually met in the last month, and how many of those women could I actually theoretically have dated? Like, the answer was zero. It's like, well, that's the problem, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with me necessarily. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm not actually putting myself into situations where I would be meeting people because I don't like dating apps. I don't like bars. I don't like clubs. It's like most introverts, those things.
Yes.
Dating apps seem shallow and mostly sort of just like a drain on my time. I've got big dreams I want to achieve, and dating
Yeah.
apps feel like kind of wasting my time. Then
Uh-huh.
similarly with bars and clubs, and they're also loud and um, the sort of people I generally want to meet. I don't imagine I'm going to meet them in clubs and bars. That might be wrong, but for me, my plans now are to actually go out and find writing groups and that sort of thing to try and meet new people, but in contexts where actually I'm likely to form genuine connections with people.
Mhm.
Um, but on the front of bitterness, because I think this is really interesting, because I've seen this happen. Not it wasn't it was an ENFP friend who
Mhm.
I've seen go down that rabbit hole of bitterness, and I was I've known him for 10 years, so I was quite close to him, so I really
Yes.
could see just how he spiraled down
Mm.
into that real bitterness where he was intentionally trying to hurt people, but in his heart he wasn't one of those people who was unconscious of what he was doing. He had enough empathy to know what he was doing, but he just didn't care that he was hurting himself while simultaneously hurting people like his mum and his friends around him. Um, yeah, and I think what happens there, I think the way I've come to understand that is that I think a lot of INFJ men, or just sort of these feeling type men in general, think that the way to get things in life is to be nice. And generally, I
Mm.
think this is the way they think that the way to get things from women, say, is to be nice rather than just to say what they want.
Yes.
And when that doesn't work out, they think that being nice in any way is somehow just sort of they assume that being nice just isn't worth it, and so it
Yeah.
sort of just
Yeah.
turns
Yeah.
them around. They turn that on the bitterness instead. That
Wow.
niceness becomes bitterness. I think it's all. I think it's based on a misunderstanding about what you actually need to get your needs met.
Right.
To get your needs met. Don't be. Being nice is not the way to get somebody into bed. Flirt with them, right? It's like there's the
Yeah.
wrong tool for the job. It's not like you don't have to be a bad guy. Just you need to use the right tool for the job.
Yes. 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 That's a really good point, actually. I think that the niceness thing is. I notice that a lot in like the women's dating sites and all that stuff because women complain about this. They're like, just because you're nice to me doesn't mean I'm gonna be happy with like to jump into bed with you. It's just not. It's just not how it works. That's like the basics of things. I'm nice to you. You're nice to me. That's the basics, and then we go from there. Um, but yeah, I really think that's such a good point. Oh, that's terrible. Anyways, so the one thing that I definitely wanted to bring up was what were you talking about? Dating or yes. So there was something that you were like, don't forget, we need to talk about this. Now I can't, I've forgotten. So now I'm like
Yeah,
completely distracted.
INFJ males and sort of relationships. I think
Yes.
sort of a lot of the I certainly have a lot of neuroses around sort of dating and that sort of thing, and I imagine other INFJ males probably also have a lot of strong feelings about that, which are quite
Mm,
negative.
mm,
Um, yeah, and I think there's many reasons for that. And part of that is the introversion and not actually meeting people. But that if you're not meeting people, it does feel like there's something wrong with you if you're not paying attention to, well, am I actually putting myself in situations where I could end up, say, dating somebody or in a relationship.
mm. And why
Then
do
on
you?
the other side,
Yeah, go
sorry,
on,
go ahead.
go on.
Because on the other side, there are genuinely narcissistic women who are like narcissistic men, quite rare, and yet I think they are drawn towards INFJ men because INFJ men are people that they can sort of take advantage of. Because INFJ men are sort of nice enough that genuinely narcissistic women would sort of prey on that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I have dated a covert narcissist. So this is somebody who uses pity, and she will use pity to manipulate a lot of things, and would constantly try and make out that she was a victim, and that she genuinely had suffered terrible things, and narcissists normally have. But she was using that definitely as manipulation, and she definitely wanted me to be who she wanted me to be, rather than just myself. And when I was talking to a friend the other day, they said that their biggest tip for INFJ males is don't allow yourself to get into a relationship where you feel shame. Shame in a relationship is just not okay. Maybe guilt for if you actually do screw up, which you will at times.
Yes.
Then yeah, it's okay obviously to feel guilty. But if you feel chronically guilty for who you are, for just saying what you really think and really feel, that's not a good relationship. Those sort of relationships. Find somebody who brings out who you really are, or makes you feel comfortable. Not somebody who gives you generally not somebody who gives you lots of butterflies, because normally butterflies are actually fear, not excitement in relationships.
Yes.
Um,
I read
you
that
want to
recently.
yeah,
That's terrible. Okay, go on, sorry.
butterflies are trauma. Somebody once said
Sorry? Butterflies what?
butterflies are trauma.
And forma?
Trauma. A childhood
Trauma.
trauma.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that's also something, actually finding people actually bring that out in you. Because I think that's not something we're generally taught, or anybody's generally taught. But I think it's particularly important for INFJ males to find women who don't rely on them necessarily um, for sort of balance. People who can be independent, who can stand on their own, who can be balanced within themselves, and also don't make people feel guilty in relationships. And obviously,
Mhm.
it comes both back to what you're doing in the relationship. Don't feel make somebody else feel guilty for who they are. If you can't accept somebody else for who they are, you're probably not meant to be in a relationship with them. It's a two-way street.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I also do notice that same as INFJ females, I would say INFJ males also run away when things get too serious, or they get to a point where they feel like they're being vulnerable, and or like they're getting their hearts kind of getting into the situation. And a lot of non-INFJ females message me about this, saying I really like this INFJ guy, but I mean obviously he likes me too, I think. But there's nothing happening, like it's just not moving forward, and he just keeps on like going into his cave. He does something really nice, and then he runs away, and then he does something really nice, and then when I say, I compliment him or praise him, he just runs away. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Um, I can say I did that. Like I did that when I was 17, 18.
Mm,
But I think I gained more maturity. I think by the time, because I did 2 years, I did this 2 years celibacy. I wanted to be a
mm,
monk. I did 2 years sort of celibacy and so forth. But once I came back from that, I sort of had much more openness to things like commitment, and I realized, there's that compromise, and um, yeah, I think it's a difficult one because I haven't done that since I was 18, and my excuses were sort of endless. Some of them are like quite nice, like I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. Doesn't don't want to make her feel uncomfortable by being too much. Um, or it's just I feel afraid. But yeah, I have noticed that avoidance is a major sort of general INFJ trait.
yeah.
Um, and I think gaining maturity as an INFJ, one of the main things you need to do is learn how to deal with emotions without avoidance. I think that's really a really key one.
Mhm.
Um, how to do that is a more difficult.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so funny because like in meditation and in yoga, you're constantly taught. This is one of the main things that they're obviously teaching you. So lean into the emotion, leaning into the emotion, lean into the emotion. And we do a lot of practices in my school where I go to, and we're always like sitting down and being like, okay, what emotion is coming up right now? Usually it's fear or anxiety for me, and I'll feel the emotion, and a lot of times I'm just like, okay, I want to run away. My hands will start shaking, or like my heart will stop beating really fast, and I literally want to run away from that situation. It's so funny to me because I'm like, I'm almost 40. I shouldn't be doing this still, but I still am. So yeah, it's really difficult to like not run away from it. Also because I think partly we've been taught all our lives that emotions are bad. We're extremely emotional and over emotional sometimes, according to society. So overly sensitive and all that stuff. And from the time we were really young, I was taught the same thing as well. I'm sure you were told the same thing. Stop being so emotional, stop crying all the time, or stop being so sensitive, stop being this and that. All related to emotions. So if you hear that over and over again, you can be like, all right, cool, I guess emotions are bad. And I need to stop, Come on, that's the
Mm.
basic essence of it, right?
Yeah, I was
Um,
definitely in primary school. I was definitely the kid who cried the most.
oh gosh, oh my gosh, I remember this one incident, and I remember it so clearly. So I was upset about something that my mother did, and I went into my room and I was crying, and I was doing the whole thing. And I heard my mom say to her friend, she's like, "Oh, it's okay. She cries all the time. Just forget about it. She'll stop crying in a like a few minutes. She'll come back. She'll be fine." And like I was just sitting there as a child, and I was like, "Shh." It doesn't even matter to my mother that I was crying, and I was really angry about it. And I was really upset actually for a long time because I realized actually it doesn't matter. My emotions don't matter, and my feelings don't matter because everyone's just gonna negate it anyways. So I kind of became a little bit of a robotic person after that. I was like, I'm not gonna show any emotion to anyone because what's the point? Um, and I'm sure a lot of INFJs had to deal with that as well, male or female, but particularly male, obviously, because males are not even more so not allowed to show emotion, right? Like you're like constantly told, like, be strong, be a man. I hate that. And things like that, right? So it's like it's the worst thing
Yeah,
in the world.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think yeah, I think having space, given because I've only more recently began to learn to open up and to learn to cry again.
Mm,
I think that's a very healthy thing to be able to do.
yes.
I think you want to find somebody, and we want to find people where you can get tearful in front of them,
Yeah.
and they will still accept you. And there are definitely people out there in the world. I've carefully curated a set of friends, and I can be emotional in front of them, it's still awkward, but
Yeah.
it's awkward for me, but not for them. They are
Yes, yes.
open to that.
Yeah.
And then maybe that's partly good fortune, but partly it's, I've been introduced to people via friends.
Mhm.
So, well, I think if it be one of those things, once you start finding friends, and that can be a hard thing to start finding friends, like finding dates as well. It's the same thing. You need to
Yes.
put yourself into situations where you're actually going to meet people.
Yeah.
Once you start really finding friends, they might introduce you to people. You can slowly begin to build up a much larger network of people who genuinely love you as friends.
Mhm.
So I might not be dating people, but I've got several friends who genuinely have love for me, and that's not a compromise. That's not any small thing. And I think that's really crucial as an INFJ male to have that support network there to keep you grounded. Otherwise, you will just spiral out. And that's
Totally.
when you want to run away in a relationship, don't make a choice without relying on your friendship group. Because I think about it as a sort of supercomputing any problem that you have. You ask these people that you really trust. What would you do here? What do you think is right here? And they can then tell you. They can talk you down from that. Oh, I'm going to run away. It's like, no, you need to actually be there. If you're not there for her, if
Yeah.
you're constantly going into a cave, she's just going to leave you, and then you're going to be distraught because you do actually want this more than you think you do.
Yes,
You
yes.
need your friends to know you and can say that to you.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
brilliant.
again, that's a long process. It's years. If you're in an isolated place now, you're going to need to start that process of how do I meet people? How do I, really begin to build up that support network? And it does take years. It will take years. It's taken me years, and I think that's going to be the same for anybody who wants to do that. But it's well worth it in the end. It's well worth it along the way, and the final result. Um,
Yeah.
it's not going to be perfect happiness, but it is, is a really a life worth living.
Wow, I love that. I love that curating your support group because it really is about not just falling into a group of people and be like, all right, I guess these are my friends. Okay, I'm just gonna have to live with it if they are or not the right person for me. But to actually like to choose people that you're gonna surround yourself with to be like, all right, these are the kind of people that will actually support me and allow me to be the best version of myself. That's brilliant. That's exactly what you need. Yes, it'll take time, like you said, but it's so worth it in the end because you can actually like be yourself with them and they will, like you said, talk you down and be like, all right, don't do stupid things, because
I
we
mean,
have
it's
a
still,
tendency to do that.
yeah. And the thing is, so people who really like INFJ males, both male and female, really exist. And I think
Yes.
actually I have most of my friends are female. I don't think that's uncommon as an INFJ male.
Yes.
That actually, if you don't fall into that bitterness with women, actually, a lot of your friendship group will probably be female because
Yeah.
you probably have a more feminine personality type. And that doesn't mean female personality type. We have
Yes.
a more feminine energy generally. We have masculine energy as well, but we have this sort of overriding feminine energy. I think you're frozen again, but yes. So I think if we can, yeah. So yeah, I think having love from female friends, that's something that's really valuable as an INFJ male, and getting very bitter with women, I think that discredits a really rich potential that INFJs have to have these really deep friendships with women.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, but then also you have to be careful because you said that you have a tendency to be friend zoned, and you don't want to be friend zoned either. Like yes, like just find the balance. Yeah, you want to make lots of female friends because obviously if that's a possibility, you'd want to be around this kind of beautiful energy. But also, if you fall in love with one of them and you're like, all right, she's never gonna look at me that way, then maybe you would become bitter, but like, oh my gosh, I always end up being the friend. But
Actually, I want to
go on.
jump in there because actually I think there's something really interesting. That I think for INFJ males, I think it's a very so with other men, I think would say would try and get attracted to a woman and then try and sleep with her, doesn't work out, they'd cut their losses. I think INFJ males, because I think we can tend to like women as people rather than just as people we're attracted to. So
Mm.
when they don't want to sleep with us, we still become their friend
Yes.
because like, well, actually, they're a really awesome person, so I want to be friends with them. I want them to like, that can also contribute to this the best friend because other men just cut their losses, get rid of the woman out of life, and say actually, or some line at Gmail say actually I want to be their friend more than I'd rather be their friend than nothing at all.
Yes.
I think that's obviously, but then that can lead to the sense, well, everybody I'm attracted to just ends up with my friend. So I was like, well, that's not necessarily that's maybe the case, but that a lot of people are attracted to, but that's because attraction is partly a numbers game, and whereas other men are going through 10 women, you've pursued 4 women,
Yeah.
and for various reasons that hasn't worked out, and they've become friends instead. And those friendships can be really valuable. And actually, I think it's really important to realize that you have to sometimes let go of the feelings if you want the friendship to work. And so, sometimes a friendship can be so valuable, you realize, although I really, really like this person, actually, I'm going to have to let this go
Mhm.
because the friendship comes first.
Yes, yes. And also, perhaps partly you're in the friend zone because you haven't been honest with the person about what your feelings are. Because you're like, oh, she's just gonna automatically figure it out because I'm nice to her. No, she's not gonna automatically figure it out. You have to actually articulate yourself and say, hey, I like you in a romantic fashion. What about you? And maybe, yeah, she'll say, no, I don't. Maybe she will say yes, who knows?
Yeah, that's really important because I definitely have found that. But then there's another stage to this advice because then I got the advice, like actually tell people how you feel.
Yeah.
But then I would go from being just completely friendly, just seeming like I wanted to be friends, and then I'd tell them how I feel. It would come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
One occasion, one particularly embarrassing occasion, something come out and said I've already got a boyfriend. She just hadn't mentioned it until that point.
Okay.
It's like okay, because there's a point where you have to start. It's like okay, get to know them and start flirting a little bit.
Yes,
Try a
yes.
little sexual escalation.
Yeah.
Subtly suggest some of your intentions, and then tell about then tell the feelings. Let things develop. Let things
Mhm.
naturally develop. Don't just like, don't just act like a friend and then suddenly jump out like, oh, actually, but I have feelings for you. It's like you can actually show some of your sexual interest or some of your romantic interest. And
Yes,
that's embarrassing. I think as that's be quite anxiety inducing and quite embarrassing.
of
And
course.
and we're also as INFJ men, I think perhaps more sensitive to the ways that women could be made uncomfortable by that, or
Yeah,
we don't want to be another man causing nuisance to a woman because I
true.
think at least as INFJ male, I've generally felt, generally been aware that women can often experience nuisance from
Yes.
men, or um, and I think that can come sort of too extreme in the case where actually so there is somebody who you're compatible with, you're still holding back,
Mhm.
even though that person you know, would actually want you to flirt with them. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
again a self-esteem thing because they're all in this situation, or INFJ males and INFJs in general. They're like, why would anyone like me? I have nothing to offer. Like, anyways, like there are lots of other people out there, blah blah. And so even if the person's literally giving them hints galore, like, hey, neon sign here, I like you. But no, we just gotta ignore it and pretend like we can't see the neon sign, or we just look away and be like, no, no, it must be for someone else. Is there someone behind me? Maybe it's for that person. And so like we just pretend like it doesn't exist. So that's again a problem because you have to realize that yeah, you have a lot to offer, like Dominic said earlier. You have a lot to offer. In fact, you have a lot more to offer than a lot of the other men out there because you're not once you get into a relationship with a woman, you're actually gonna treat them really well. Like you're really sensitive. You know what they're feeling. You're empathic. You're gonna actually know before what they're feeling, and you'll be able to help them out. So give credit to yourself and realize, yeah, it's a good thing, and yeah, maybe probably she does like you if she's giving you all these hints, and you just need to be like brave enough to say, okay, let's go for it, even if it doesn't work out.
yeah, I think that's one of the things you can constantly look for the hints. I think at some point you do just have to say, I'm just going to tell her my feelings and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually one of the things that's most likely to lead to a relationship is telling somebody about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't develop strong feelings for another person until they know the other person returns those feelings. So
Yes,
being the
yes.
first one to say it is really important.
Yeah, you're very right. You're actually really, really right. Also, because a lot of people are so confused about their feelings, anyways. They have no idea what's going on within them. And so a lot of us are actually looking for clues from the outside to be like, all right, what, wait, do I like this? I like hanging out with them. Do I actually really like them? But yeah, no, you're so right. Like, I think just having a conversation about it and letting it be awkward and embarrassing. What's the big deal? You're not gonna die from it. In fact, it's probably gonna be it's probably gonna work out even better than you expected. So just get over all of your fears and actually like just go for it. I think one of the final things I wanted to speak to you about INFJ males, like we talked about relationships and stuff and friend zoning and all that, is caves and caving. Like how does it work for INFJ males? Is it similar to INFJ females or is it a little bit different?
Um, Yeah, this is interesting because I don't do that really that much anymore.
Mm,
That's something I have sort of grown out of in many ways. So I don't know. Perhaps it's an INFJ. I don't know how is it an INFJ maturity thing. I don't know.
mm, mm,
But I certainly used to isolate myself quite a lot. And yeah, when I'm really interested in a subject, I can channel a lot of energy into that and neglect friendships and so forth.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I do have that. That is that tendency. I guess yeah, okay, that tendency is there. So maybe I should retreat on what I just said. Yeah, I can when I'm really interested in something, I can get there. But then I will make plans with friends. I just stick to them. I will,
Yeah.
you know, I will. I think the important thing is I realize that even though I don't necessarily want to do it beforehand, you know, having that contact, keeping myself grounded in the social world in that way, you know, forcing myself to make plans, then stick to them with people.
Yeah.
That actually is helpful. Um, so I think there's a preference there that you can perhaps if you know it's worth experimenting with resisting that and seeing what happens. I think.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Practice definitely makes perfect with that. Also because it's like a rest, it's a skill that gets rusty if you don't use it for a while. I do notice like after the pandemic when I was really isolated and not talking to anyone, after that I had no idea. I didn't even know how to converse with people. I was so confused. I was like, what am I supposed to do here? Should I put my hand here or here? I have no idea. I was a complete mess. Not that I'm
because
much better
also,
now.
yeah. The other thing you get used to talking to yourself in your head.
Yes.
You get used to having conversations in your own head, which means when you actually start talking to people, you just monologue because you get so used to having monologue in your head. You like then you just sit down and just like. And I had to do this recently because I was in hospital for 2 weeks and I wasn't really talking to people. And then I
Uh-huh.
came back. I had to learn how to have conversation with people again and like emotionally connect with people.
Yes.
So I had to remind myself, oh yeah, I had to actually not just talk about all abstract things that I've been thinking about. I had to actually
Yeah.
talk about my feelings and my struggles and the
Yeah.
things that really matter to me. Like what's the biggest challenge in my life
Hmm.
at the moment? That's something to talk about, to talk with friends. If you don't talk about that with your friends, you won't feel connected to them, and you will feel lonely. And then you'll
Yes.
go, well, what's the point of this? And I might as well just go back to my cave. You
Right.
do have to actually have these conversations where you get vulnerable with
Hmm.
people, and that's really what will make your life rich and really worth it.
Mm. Um, so I really do love that because what I realize, especially in being in a lot of random relationships here in Bali, because I'm in making a lot of new friends, obviously, is that it is literally about putting yourself out there first. INFJs are always waiting for the other person to put themselves out first. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of INFJ males complain about the fact that they'll never be the first one to initiate, ever, 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 ever. And so they're always waiting for the other person because they're like, oh, I don't know if she's interested or not. I don't want to pursue her and make her feel uncomfortable, like you said. But then they're just waiting, and the other person's waiting, and you're waiting, and it becomes like a 50-year saga where like no one said anything, and you're just friends for 50 years, right? You don't want to do that, right? So you have to be one, not only in friendships but in relationships and romantic relationships. Try to be the first one to put yourself out there first. What would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I've definitely been the one who always holds back. That relates
I've
that
done
very
that
much
too.
resonates with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think, and the thing is, with men, the expectation is that the man is going to be one to
Yeah.
initiate, and that might not always be the case, but that's generally the expectation.
Yes.
So women will try to give you prompts to make you the one to be the one
Yeah.
to initiate. They won't necessarily be the one to initiate. And then obviously, your own self doubts come in. You then
Yeah.
think, well, does this person really like me? That prompt isn't really a prompt. They're blowing kisses at me because I don't know. That's just what they do to their friends.
They were drunk. Oh
Yeah,
no, it's
and
terrible.
yeah, and I don't know. I think it comes back to that learning to hear no, learning to hear, learning to just it's going to be it's going to be an anxious moment in your life, but just
Mhm.
learning to swallow that and say, what can I do? And actually, once you start telling people how you really feel, because I have got to that stage now where I've started telling people how I really feel. It isn't working out so far, but I'm telling people how I really feel, and actually, it gets less anxiety inducing over time. You get used to it. You get used to it. Like actually, I can tell this person how I feel. The world doesn't end.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's okay. It's you know, there's nothing there to be so frightened. It seems looking back now, it seems odd to me that I was so scared of it because now, just by the exposure, I've become less afraid, and it doesn't scare me much anymore.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. Exposure therapy. Like, just the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the less fearful it becomes. Same thing with these YouTube videos. I think I've spoken about this so many times. At first when I was doing them, I was a ball of fear. Like my heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my temples. Like I could hear it in my head, and it was like, wow. But now, it's a casual thing. It's as simple as breathing. So it really is truly about doing it over and over and over and over again, and realizing, okay, never give up, never be like, all right, I'm done with women, I'm never going to look at them again, blah blah. No, like, don't get into that phase of, like you said, bitterness, and be like, okay, I'm just going to shut myself down and shut myself off, because that's never a good idea. Never, ever, ever. No matter how many times you've been hurt, you still have to get up and try again. It might be the 10,000th time, but you still have to get up and try again. And so, yeah, I really love that. I think I think that should be good. I think I've asked you all the questions I wanted to ask. But if any INFJ males are listening and you have questions, or you're like, or you would like to talk to Dominic directly, then you can. How would you get in contact with you?
Well, I think the place to start with YouTube comments.
Okay,
Um,
good.
yeah, and then
That's
then we can go
perfect.
from there.
Yeah, that's great. Because then, if you can put a comment in, then Dominic will directly reply to you. And maybe if you guys want to have a deeper conversation, you can figure it out from there. And also, if you have questions, then if you put out a lot of questions, then we can do another session where I bring in Dominic and we can have another common conversation about this. Hopefully, in a place where the internet is a bit better, for God's sake. Anyways. So again, thank you so much for coming on. And I know it's kind of early for you. Hopefully, I didn't take up too much of your time.
No, this is good.
Um,
This is really wonderful. I
and
hope
I'm
it's been
always
helpful.
Oh, it was really helpful. Actually, I hope people will actually listen to the whole thing. And hopefully it wasn't too choppy for everyone who's listening. I apologize about the internet. Uh, it never works when it's supposed to. Anyways. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dominic. I'll see you the next time. Bye, everyone.